and consider where we may want to add to the report. I wanted to bounce a couple of ideas off of this group and then just open it up to what others are thinking that we need to do to respond to the commission's dispatch to us that we consider what was done in July of 23 was a draft. And what I sent to everybody yesterday or the day before were two potential, and I'm calling them chapters for lack of a better word, but they're each about a couple of pages. One is to take that presentation on kind of best practices and comp planning done by the Berkeley Group to the commission back in December and turn that into, from a PowerPoint set of bullet points into a document. And I worked with Michael Zahner to produce what I sent you. It's short, but it really kind of reemphasizes some very things that I think we said originally, but it's done in a concise page and a half. And then the other was to take the very interesting discussion we got into at the last technical committee meeting, and with kind of kicked off by Harrison, who never misses an opportunity to talk about community or shared solar and remind us that we have to go there, which we are going to go there, just not so far today. But then that led to Michael Volpe talking about what's really going on in the marketplace and in the infrastructure world, which I thought was just fascinating, and it really piqued my interest because of the discussions that had gone on at the General Assembly, where I was told by bill patrons that sorry, I got another request for the link. Sorry. Okay. I was told by bill patrons that the reason we're not going to meet our goals is local government, and I take exception to that. And I thought that what Michael had to share with us last time was really on point. With that background, I just want to throw it open and see what people think of these two pieces. Is this worth taking to the commission and suggesting that it be added to it? And then after we get past that, are there other things that we should be digging into? With that, I'm going to be quiet and listen. But I guess first we ought to do introductions. So let's go around the room. Brianna, I'm going to start with you, since you were the first on today.
Hi, Brianna Heath. I'm the environmental planner for the Northern Neck Planning District Commission.
Okay. John.
Don McCarthy, Senior Advisor, Piedmont Environmental Council.
Ryan.
Hey, Ryan Gilchrist, Vice President of Development at Open Road Renewables.
Since I called your company out, we'll give you an opportunity to weigh in shortly.
Yeah, I think Mike will be joining.
Okay, Tommy.
Tommy Blackwell, former Commissioner of the Revenue, Essex County, currently in between jobs, and also still a friend of the Rappahannock.
Thanks, Tommy. Larry.
I'm Larry Zeragos, Chair of the Environmental Quality Advisory Council in Fairfax County.
Thanks, Larry. Nice to have you join us. Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Edwards, Environmental Programs Manager with the Rappahannock Rapidan Regional Commission.
Amelia.
Good morning, Amelia Boshin. I'm an environmental manager with Dominion Energy.
Thanks for being with us. Ashish, did I say that correctly?
You did, yes. Good morning. Ashish Kapoor, Senior Energy and Climate Policy Analyst at PEC.
Thank you. Deirdre.
Good morning. I'm Deirdre Clark, Director with John Marshall Soil and Water Conservation District, serving Fauquier County.
Thank you, Deirdre. Harrison, since I called you out.
Harrison Bremen, Clover County Planning and Zoning.
Good morning. Okay, thanks everybody. I'm expecting John Bateman to join us, so he may pop in at any point. All right, with all that, just reactions to what I said to kick this off, and don't be shy. Oh boy.
I'll start with something.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Last week, attended a Richmond County Board of Supervisors meeting. We were representing, I was representing the Northern Neck Land Conservancy, of which I'm now on the board. But there was a presentation by folks from, oh, I can't remember the name of the Strata, who's completing a large solar facility in Richmond County at Booker's Mill. It'll be the third large facility in Richmond County, and just was taken back by the number of these solar facilities that are popping up in the Northern Neck, in Lancaster, Richmond County, and Westmoreland. So I went back out to the DEQ website and looked at what's happening with permits, the permit by rule. And so I'm currently updating a table that I put together, I guess, a couple years ago, well, 18 months ago, try to show the status of all the solar facilities in the Rappahannock River Basin. So I'm currently working on that. Just thought I'd bring that up.
Well, I think speaking for myself, would love to see that as you get that farther along. I'm sure there are other people on this Zoom that would feel the same way.
It shouldn't take long to update it.
Eldon, this is Michelle Edwards. As I mentioned to you via email, last week, I attended the Chesapeake Research Consortium Roundtable meeting last week that was on kind of updating people on the status of solar utility in the Bay region. And Mike Rollband from DEQ gave a status update that was really fascinating to me. It painted a picture of major issues with enforcement on solar utility projects that really surprised me, especially coming from him, that basically was saying that these projects aren't being adequately enforced. They're having major issues with stabilization of the sites, that they're not, in a lot of cases, they have no vegetation prior to the panels being installed, and they're still having major erosion and sediment control issues. And basically, you know, it's a major issue that DEQ is trying to address. And he had lots of photo evidence of this, and it surprised the heck out of me that this was still a major issue across the state, given all of the efforts on best practices and whatnot. I think it would be really worth it to have DEQ present to the group, if not Mike, then one of the other staff that can tell us what's going on with this and what specifically because this was an hour presentation and he was one of 3 presenters. I would like to hear more of what's going on with DEQ on this issue and what they're doing to try to help this, what localities can do to try to help this. But yes, it sounds like there's major erosion, sediment control, and stormwater issues on at least some of these projects. I won't say that, every solar developer out there is a bad actor, but he painted a pretty grim picture of state of this.
Um,
But yes, and there was also mention of across the board, people calling for policy incentives for siting these facilities on brownfield sites. And I still think that's something that we should be pushing for, because yes, they're not going to install them there unless there's some incentive. But Mike Rollband had said that he was approached by a solar developer that said pretty much the reason why these things are not being stabilized adequately is because DEQ isn't enforcing it well enough, and it's cheaper not to, that it's expensive and difficult to stabilize them. That
Wow.
Mike said, in some cases, it's really compacted soil, it's really hard pan, it's almost impossible for grass to grow. I don't know how true any of this is. I'm just passing along what was presented.
I'd also,
Um,
sorry, go ahead, Deidre.
let me go ahead, John. John had his hand up. John Bateman.
Let me just say that when you're citing these facilities in such challenging environments, this is an inevitable reality. And I question whether citing it on a brownfield site when we have land disturbance issues and land cover issues is really a good idea either. So just putting that out there.
Okay. Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just add to Michelle's comment, like the two, I think, key best management practices that were mentioned in the call were the PV Smart tool, and I don't know if folks have used that from the Great Plains Institute, but there's an effort to kind of make that with some VT research. Penn State's working on it to make it a little bit more relevant for our region and reflect the soils and grading and so forth that we have here. And the other thing that's come up a couple of times, and curious if anyone else has any insights on this, is the all-terrain trackers that Nevados has that really seem to be a win-win. I mean, they eliminate the need for any major grading, and there's a lot of money saved there that more than offsets the cost, the more expensive cost of the trackers. So that prevents denuding the whole area and prevents those runoff issues and so on and so forth. So I think the site in Winchester saved $3 or $4 million is what Michael had said. If so, I think that's something that we definitely need to see a lot more of. And the last thing I'll mention, to Michelle's point about the sort of all of the DEQ violations, he did say that they'd be enforcing those a lot more strictly. I don't know if it's just a resource issue, it seems to be, but that he anticipates a lot more enforcement on that.
Yeah, you have a great point on the technology. The Nevados trackers and other all-terrain tracking technology has come a long way. So for a site that we might have designed in 2018, you might see a 30% grading recommendation by the engineering, the civil team, but now you can get that down to 2 to 5% on the same site. And we also, Open Road spends a ton of time in the communities before we actually try to apply for these permits. And some of the things that we land on in terms of the listening sessions and the negotiations on the special exception conditions, there's 3 things that have worked really well. One is to commit to the stormwater BMPs being far in excess of what the DEQ recommendations are. The second is actually having a private stormwater consultant who is hired to do the enforcement, report if they go out there one morning and it looks like there's any runoff or there's not enough stabilization in one area. And then the third is just agreeing to only disturb a portion of the site at one time. So if you have a 800-acre site, disturb 200, get that stabilized, move the construction onto the next 200 and so on. So those are the things that we're working with localities on all of our current projects.
I mean, I agree with everything that both of you have said. There's a lot. I think we keep adding to these best practices. And technology, certainly on the presentation last week, both Penn State and researchers from Virginia Tech were talking about the increases in technology, and it's coming, so far, so fast, and continue to add to that, but also making sure that these best practices that DEQ is enforcing what they're saying. There's what is already on the books, because it doesn't matter what policies we have if it's not being adhered to in some cases.
Mhm.
Is
Michelle, oh, sorry,
no, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Daniel.
I was wondering if there was any mention of considerations for siting and impacts to groundwater recharge areas and staging of the development. For example, in Fauquier County, where we're like 80% dependent upon wells, groundwater recharge areas are of considerable significance and importance to the county. I was just wondering if there has been any consideration for groundwater recharge and the manner in which runoff is handled in concert with that.
That was not mentioned at all that I recall on the call.
Okay, I haven't seen it anywhere either, but this last year's drought certainly brought it home to us. As of course was evident that anything you do on the surface certainly impacts what happens below the surface.
Ryan, are you aware of anybody who has produced any kind of best practices relative to development of the sites, relative to, the construction?
In terms of like a special exception, what the conditions would look like, the 10 pages of conditions that were attached to the permit, or
I think some of the things that you said, like staging the development, getting one part of the area stable before you move on to the next, those sorts of things. I just wondered if anybody has tried to capture those kind of best practices, if you will, in one place.
Yeah, we had, so there's a project called the Walnut Solar Center. It's a 150 megawatt project on the Middle Peninsula in King and Queen County. And that was one of the projects where I know that we developed some of these best practices. I see Mike's joining now. Maybe he can give an update on the status of notice to proceed on construction for the project in King and Queen County. But that would be a good example of where these best practices came out of more than 2 years of back and forth with the county before landing on some construction, some stormwater management, and other conditions that we're excited to see come into play.
All right, an open question to everybody in the group. Is that the type of thing that might be worth adding to this document to making it available to our our elected officials? That open question.
It was generally a practice. It was generally a practice in Fauquier to include staging sequences within the development plan for residential and commercial, and certainly this is commercial. And I would think that most localities would have that within their regime for any type of development. You designate one area or whatever size or percentage of the future development, and then stage it accordingly. That would certainly be within the purview of the ENS inspection process and development of the site plan.
Okay. Other observations on that?
Alden, this is Amelia. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Amelia.
I just was going to mention, and I'm trying to find it right now, but I know that like DMME in the past had been working on developing a program that was sort of specifically targeted towards advising localities who were less experienced with solar development in identifying some of those best practices and what they might want to consider in terms of discussing, what would go into a local permit, that kind of thing. I have not managed to Google and find it yet, but I was thinking to myself, I feel like there have been some efforts out there to, like, to your point, compile some of these lessons learned, best practices that have come out of the experience we've gained so far, and make them available to the decision makers who can really use them. So anyway, I'll keep looking, but I just wanted to kind of to mention I feel like that probably exists, but I can't quite put my hand on it right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm gonna switch back around to the door that Michelle opened up, referring to Mike Rolband's presentation on lack of enforcement. And I saw a note from John Bateman that John, you want to talk a little bit more about monitoring and enforcement from y'all's perspective, because you've got some projects there in Lancaster.
Yeah, we have, well, we had 2 environmental codes and compliance officers. One of them just left. So we're down to 1. And, they only have a year of experience under their belt. And, our largest project, which is the Waller Solar project, when it comes online and starts construction, yeah, we got a lot of time between now and then, but, even with 2 people, that's not enough to monitor such a large site, and these are being cited. This project is cited in somewhat of a challenging environment with a lot of topography. I don't see how we're going to, be able to do it internally. Someone mentioned hiring a consultant, and I'm not sure if that's a consideration that's been made in the planning process, but I'm certainly going to go look into it.
Are others finding similar problems with local enforcement? Are they relying on DEQ to do that?
I'm not relying on DEQ to do anything.
Okay, I'll just leave that where that is. Deirdre.
Amen. Just voicing my concurrence with Mr. Bateman's comment.
Well, from what I've heard from the last year, I don't know where they are at the moment, but their staffing was having the same problems that Mr. Bateman's, which Lancaster County is having. There's a fair amount of transition and turnover, and the qualifications of people they've been bringing on board have been slow to get up to speed. Not that that's an excuse, it just explains somewhat why. I think it explains why Rolband was showing out, was calling out all those violations, which has been recurring all over the state.
Mm-hmm.
So we're able to identify an enforcement problem, and it sounds like to me it's a lack of resources. What do we do about it? Go ahead, Deirdre.
Well, perhaps you issue your land disturbance permits accordingly. And I know that is not economically the best news for anyone who's interested in development, but it's a reality. And there have been so many changes within each organization, especially with regard to ENS enforcement and so on, that it is a challenge.
I mean, one option is contracting out, hiring a contractor to do inspections, a third-party contractor, and charging that to the developer. The other thing is just making our elected officials aware that this is an issue, so it becomes a priority for them.
Okay.
I think all information is good information. So yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw this a little bit, the contracting for inspections and charging the developer of the project to our development folks who are on here, Ryan, Mike, and Amelia, for that. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, Eldon, this is Amelia. I'll just say we've seen that on some projects. So, you know, that's definitely a strategy for addressing that issue.
Okay, so if that's something that we're saying is a suitable practice, Dominion's not pushing back on that.
No, I mean, we're certainly, it's in, you know, our interest to work with counties and, you know, do what's needed to facilitate development in that county. You know, there's lots of challenges. So if we can come to an agreement about how to address one of them, that's all to the good.
Thank you, Amelia. Ryan, you got a perspective on it? Ryan, could you hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm actually pulling up the conditions that I had mentioned before, and I can paste into the chat what we had done. Let's see. But yeah, come back to me in just a minute.
Okay, all right, fair enough. But I don't hear you saying that's a deal breaker from your perspective.
No, not at all. These are the kind of things that come out of these conversations with the localities, and we're happy to do it. I think if anything, Open Road has been doing this, and other developers are being sort of dragged along, and we're happy to keep doing that.
Okay.
Well, Eldon, with regard to residential development in the past, we've sometimes run into a fox guarding the hen house situation. And we find the scales tipping more toward the source of payment to the inspector as opposed to the stringency of the regulatory organization.
Thanks for bringing that up, Deirdre. In my mind, for that to be done and address that issue is the payment for the consultant is by the locality, and the developer is providing the resources to the locality, rather than the developer paying the contractor directly.
Directly, exactly.
Oh, no, Eldon. I mean, this is a
Would be
common
better.
practice regardless of whether it's a solar utility or some other large project. And yes, the just as if the locality was hiring a third-party consultant to do their plan review, like some happens in some cases for small localities where they'll contract out plan review for stormwater. It's the same thing. The locality would contract the third-party inspector, just like any other service that the county would procure, and then charge the solar utility for that fee.
Okay.
Hey, Eldon, good morning. This is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning. I'd just like to add a little bit to the conversation if possible.
Please.
The experience in King and Queen, I think, set the gold standard as a byproduct of some stormwater events in Essex and others. And the specific concern was that the erosion and sediment control handbook, while good, is buried in 33 chapters of text. And the process in King Queen that we followed was to do a belt and suspenders where the ENS handbook governs, but to pull the specific language out of the ENS handbook into the CUP conditions, and then go above and beyond that, where there was the requirement for the applicant to fund inspector or inspectors. And then after every quarter-inch rainfall event, there has to be an evaluation of the perimeter control measures and all the sediment basins. And I'd just like to highlight that perhaps the observation by Mr. Rollband of the situation is a byproduct of two dynamics that are solvable. One is that perhaps some of the projects that are under construction right now were sort of under a legacy regime whereby there was not sufficient volume of BMPs, sediment basins, perimeter control measures, et cetera. And then it really comes down to resourcing on the inspection side of it. So, you know, the developers who want to see this industry be successful and iron out the wrinkles that we're having, we believe that really good planning, finding conditions in the special exception or the CUP, and then robust third-party enforcement funded by the applicant but engaged by the locality is the way to ensure that we don't continue to have these stormwater events. Because it certainly is solvable. It's just that we need to make sure that all of the best practices are bound in the CUP or the special exception permit conditions. That's my personal view on it, because otherwise it gets buried too far down in other regulations.
Thank you, Mike. Others reactions to what Mike had to say? All right, I'm going to ask a question, Mike, and I guess this is you and Ryan. Would it be appropriate for us to provide an example, what y'all have done in King and Queen as an example of conditions as part of our public document?
We would be happy to provide the conditions on every conditional use permit that we've applied for and received in the state, because they're public records, and that includes Walnut, it includes Waller, it includes all of the projects. So yeah, we're happy to provide that. What's observable in Walnut is the CUP conditions are 18 pages long. And no, really, I mean, but that's because of the desire for belt and suspenders, because of the concern of a stormwater event in the Chesapeake watershed. And that was something that took a lot of work. And I know that Dominion and Strata, who are now building the project, have had to work through that with staff in the final site plan process, and it's taken more work. But the final product of that project, in terms of the perimeter vegetative screening, in terms of the BMPs and the impact or lack thereof of the local community, certainly should be the gold standard. So as a output of this meeting, we're happy to send you all of the permit CUP conditions that we've received, and we can send you the draft conditions that we're proposing at Alameda and Fauquier as well, because I think what you see is just as time goes on, the consideration, sensitivities, thoughtfulness that goes into this effort just continues to ratchet up over time.
I would very much like to receive those, and exactly how we make it available. We need to think that through from this end in our very low resource. I don't see publishing an 18-page chapter edition, because that would be half the length of the current document. But I do see having them available, and maybe some kind of a summary, and then making sure our commission members are aware that these resources exist. Tommy, you got your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to ask Ron and Mike, who did you interface with at the locality level? Was it the county administrator, or the members of the board of supervisors, others?
It was everybody. So in King Queen, Tom Schwartzwelder was the county administrator and attorney, and Donna Sprouse was the planning department lead. Those were the two main staff members that we worked with, but certainly to attain the requisite yes vote from the board, we interface with all the board supervisor members as well. And just a quick aside, Walnut Solar in King Queen County was a project that in 2020 recognized the need for high-speed internet in King Queen County. There's 9,000 people that live there and they didn't have high-speed internet. And that project wanted to make a voluntary payment to support infrastructure investment in the county by way of high-speed internet. There was a federal grant, a VATI grant, and then a $4 million local match that the county had to fund from their general fund. And there was not a statutory regime for voluntary payments to be made to support infrastructure investment in the county. And that project, in partnership with Tom Schwartzwelder and Delegate Keith Hodges, supported House Bill 1675, the siting agreement legislation that enabled the voluntary payment. So the exercise was, really good siting in terms of low population density and low impact to local community. Really, really robust engagement with staff on the technical aspects of development and construction, and then finding a compelling land use case in the interplay between county budget and all the considerations that go into it with the board. So that's probably more information than you're looking for. But Donna would be a contact to engage with, and Tom's no longer at the county, but he'd be someone as well.
Yeah, I figured it was Tom and Donna, but I wanted to hear it. And I can only imagine that a lot of it was driven by what happened in Essex a couple years prior to that.
You're talking about your storm event and your ENS problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm sorry. Right.
Yeah, the chocolate soup. Yeah, that came from the
right.
project. Yep.
Would you say chocolate soup?
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and that wasn't our project, but that's a big black eye on the industry, right? So
Oh,
we
absolutely.
wanted to work. Yeah, we wanted to work with staff at King Queen and figure this out. And we brought in all the technical experts from Timmons Group. Dan Jameson is a real expert on this stuff and the output, and perhaps the Dominion representative can talk about this. The volume of sediment basins on that project, I think there's like 80 or 100 sediment basins. Don't quote me on it. We can go to the final site plan that's been approved, but it's incredibly robust in terms of the volume of civil BMPs on that project relative to what was done 3 or 4 years ago.
How many acres is that project?
It's just under 1,000 acres within the fence. It's 150 megawatt AC.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. All right. Other comments or questions? And Michael, I'll take you up on your offer. We'd love to have those documents, and then I'll figure out how to report that to the commission.
Happy to share it with you.
Thank you. Other comments, observations, suggestion of other things that we should make available as part of this document and effort? Okay, any comments on the two short pieces that we distributed? And I want to thank Michael Zahner for helping me with that one, and Michael Volpe for helping me with the other one. I appreciate it very much. Larry, you got your hand up.
I do. I just had a thought, and that is that sometimes you have, I'm thinking about data centers right now, and data centers have huge energy needs and requirements. And so, and a number of the data centers have promised to basically be energy neutral. And the way they do that is with renewable energy. And so to the extent that you have a customer that is calling for a particular development, it may be possible to, I think would be good if you could find a way to kind of bring them into the process, because if they recognize that they can be either credited for doing a good job, or that they would be liable in some way to the public for having an awful project, that may help to influence them to do a better job And I think that's an issue with a lot of the development right now, because there's a tendency to have all these projects built under third parties. And so you can't really know who the primary party is. And it's a suggestion I've made to some members of our board. Try to crack that relationship.
Thank you, Larry. Harrison, is your question on that topic, or?
Oh, no, it was something different. So if we want to keep on talking about Larry's topic real quick before I interject with my own shenanigans, that's totally fine.
All right. Hey, reaction to Larry's comment before I go to Harrison? All right, Harrison, take it away.
Awesome. Okay. So in addition to, you know, how I constantly shill about the whole distributed solar stuff, one thing with the future of utility solar in Virginia in general, I think one thing we might want to look at is storage and or even the ratepayer system, I think, because basically in California, and the people who are much more knowledgeable on solar utility can correct me or fill in the gaps I'm going to leave out when I say this, but apparently California had such a massive, one could say, success with how much distributed solar that they've done and utility solar, that there's a huge price inversion. I think they call it like a duck inversion, where basically it hit, like, the prices for energy hit near zero during the midday, and it's causing a huge issue in terms of adopting, you know, clean renewable energy and just the energy market in general. I'm not sure how Dominion or Appalachian Valley Mountain Power and, you know, all the other cooperatives here do that here in Virginia, but that might be something just to take a look at in terms of if that would be a problem here in Virginia. I'm going to try to do a quick little Google search real quick on what the actual phenomenon's called, but that just might be something that we might want to just keep in the peripheries so that we don't end up having a huge issue regarding the energy market if we either keep on pushing for large utility, or we do a huge push for, you know, distributed.
Okay. Thank you, Harrison. And as a footnote, as I indicated in an email to everybody earlier, I've been there were a couple of bills that passed this session that dealt with shared solar, community solar, distributed, however you want to say it. Terms are somewhat interchangeable. And got somebody who was involved in those bills are going to join us our next meeting to talk a little bit about that and the importance of that, and then what's ahead for additional potential policy to promote that. Okay, that was a commercial for next time. Other thoughts, comments?
I'd like to comment to Harrison's comment, if possible. This is Mike.
Go ahead.
What Harrison mentioned in California is true as a result of the coincident generation of a bunch of solar coming on in the middle of the afternoon and then coming off when the sun goes down. And essentially, the value of the marginal electrons that are coming on in California during those sunlight hours is essentially zero, because there's as much generation during those hours from solar as there is load. The dynamics in PJM and in Virginia in particular are really quite different than that, in that the phenomenon that we face and then what we're seeing and what the RTO has communicated is there's a very real concern of not having enough electrons on the system to meet the economic development goals of the state. And when you look at the penetration level of solar in California relative to the penetration levels in Virginia over the relevant time frame, while it is true what he shared about California, I would posture that it's apples and oranges from what we're seeing and going to see in Virginia between now and 2035.
Thanks for that, Mike. It helped me out a little bit on the phenomenon of that Harrison was talking about, and then factoring in storage. If you've got all that excess power coming online in the middle part of the day, does the emerging growth of storage, which I really have very limited knowledge of, have a positive impact on that, or does it not?
Yeah, certainly from a technical perspective, adding storage, let's say a 4-hour battery at the site of the generation, allows you to change when the energy is dispatched to the system. But again, that assumes that the system has as many electrons from renewables at the time as the load. And we're very, very, very far away from that in Virginia, miles and miles and miles and miles. You know, the peak system load in Virginia is about 20 gigawatts. And the VCA says that they're trying to get 16.5 gigawatts online by 2035. And that's a tall stretch from my perspective. And it's expected that load will grow over that time. The challenge is, while technically adding storage would allow you to shift the output to a later point in time when the sun goes down, economically, you've got to have a market design that values energy at that time after the sun goes down sufficiently robustly enough to fund the investment in the storage assets, whether that's behind the meter Tesla Powerwall, or whether that's a utility scale storage asset co-located with solar or in a region with a lot of solar penetration. And the VCA has a goal of just over 2,000 megawatts of storage being added over this next, I think, 8 years, 10 years. And we'll see that get built out. And if battery costs really, really come down, then you would see more battery additions. But in Virginia, we don't have the phenomenon where we've got too many electrons when we don't need them at this point. We need all the electrons we can get. So in California, storage would help solve that technically. I don't know whether the economics work or not. And perhaps in time, that'll be something that'll be relevant and central to Virginia. But at this point, it's not a necessary element from my perspective.
Okay, thank you. That helps. Ashish.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation. Would it have a benefit in those nighttime hours? I mean, as more solar is coming online within PJM, aren't we going to see more of an exacerbation of not being able to have generation during the nighttime, and while load from data centers increases and they're doing more of their processes in the night? It does, you know, it's a matter of what you compare it to. And if we compare batteries and their cost and their utility to building out more gas generation, for example, does it have utility in that regard, preventing to have, to build out additional infrastructure to accommodate for that nighttime data center demand?
It certainly could, Ashish. This is Mike. Good to connect. But the premise of it is that you've got surplus electrons during the sunlight hours. And we're just miles away from that in Virginia. So my view over the relevant planning horizon, called the next 10 years, is you're going to add solar, you're going to add some batteries, you're going to add some gas, and you're going to retire less plants than is forecast in the VCA because we need the electrons on the system. So in the scenario where every solar project that comes off, some baseload unit comes off, then certainly you would want surplus electrons during the sunlight hours, and then batteries to help shift the generation. But really, I think that as a result of the economic expansion of the state and the region, we need all electrons. And what that means is that the development community is going to need to keep really bringing their game up as best as possible on these land use cases, and that you'll see solar, you'll see batteries, and you'll see gas as relevant land use cases over this planning horizon.
Scott,
Thank you.
Hi, first of all, I apologize for showing up late. I had a previous commitment I couldn't get out of, but I just wanted to indicate that the storage challenges and the load challenges in Virginia would even be worse, of course, during the winter time when maybe we only have 8 hours of sunlight. That means that you need 16 hours worth of storage to keep those data centers, humming at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, if we're going to satisfy peak load in February, it's going to require a lot more solar than satisfying peak load in August.
Fair enough. Harrison.
Yeah, so thank you very much for clarifying all that, and glad to hear it's not a near-term problem for Virginia, but I think just, with what was just brought up with the data center load increases and, winter sun decreasing, whatnot, that maybe batteries are still something we want to talk about and highlight in regards to, at least for a very long-term planning outlook beyond 10 years. Definitely nowhere near as no, we don't need as many exclamation marks around it as I originally thought, since the duck curve isn't really going to be a huge thing for us, but it might just be something in terms of just a very long range resiliency we might want to look into, I think. And then also a clarifying question. I heard that gas still being part of that mix in the future to get those electrons on the grid. I thought that the Clean Energy Act that Virginia passed would not would not really be in support of additional gas infrastructure, but maybe I'm wrong. If anyone could clarify that for me, that'd be much appreciated.
Wait and see if anybody can.
He's right. We're supposed to be fossil free, but Dominion says there's no way in the world that's going to happen. So there'll be a collision between practical realities and statutory requirement.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Scott.
this is Mike. I agree with that view. I think the statute says by 2045 or 2050, we're supposed to be fossil free. But the point that was raised about the winter peak that hits at 6 or 7 a.m. and the need for electrons on the grid, there's not the transmission capacity and the political will to site so much solar and storage that you have surplus electrons at scale to then store and dispatch on that cold winter morning. So my personal view, and I don't know if it's my company's view or not, but I see gas being a relevant and necessary fuel source to serve the growing load needs in the Commonwealth over the years ahead. And I believe that the collision course of decarbonization versus economic expansion, that economic expansion will win out from a policy perspective. And folks will see decarbonization as perhaps more of a nice to have, where, adding facilities that will result in more jobs and tax base, it takes precedence. I know that's perhaps a controversial thing to say from a renewable developer, but, rather play cards up in this group as we have since we joined.
Well, Mike, I would say, looking at Virginia's historical bias towards supporting economic development, I think you may say that's a controversial statement, but I think it's a very realistic statement. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, and thank you, everybody. We're gonna keep plowing ahead with what are the other topics that are associated with this. We're also going to move into some other areas as the technical committee continues to meet over the rest of 24. Just a couple of housekeeping things I want to touch on. I think the agenda I sent out still showed the June commission meeting. It's June 19th. That's June 26th. The commission moved it. We got off of the Juneteenth holiday, but we will still be at the Blau Center. And anybody who wants to attend, I encourage you, because that is quite a facility that Longwood is going to be developing there, and it's worth seeing the site. Beautiful, beautiful view up on the cliff over Lower Machota Creek. If I have my Northern Neck creeks right. Which also means, and I'm going to talk about that agenda in just a minute, but that also means that our June 26th technical committee meeting is impacted. And my question to this group, how would people feel about moving that meeting to July 3rd, 1 week farther out? That would give us 2 meetings in July, but they'd be 5 weeks apart because July has 5 weeks. July 3.
Eldon, my observation is a lot of people take time off around the 4th, so I don't know how much participation you're going to get on July 3rd.
Right, and of course going the other way puts us at Juneteenth. So it may be that we just drop the June meeting, but we can revisit that at the May 22nd meeting. I'm just putting that out there for everybody. June 26th commission meeting, we will be having a presentation from Lowry Becker, who several people here recommended. Used to be Lowry Pemberton, on living shorelines, and she is confirmed. I'm sorry Brent's not with us, but I was looking for him to bring us up to date on the Rappahannock Roundtable. We had talked about septic and as a future agenda item, and I think Michelle had highlighted that as something we needed to address. I think we're going to be doing that at our September meeting, where we'll have Kevin McLean back with us from DEQ, but also I'd like to bring in Culpeper Soil and Water because they have such a robust septic program using grant funds over the years for doing septic repair. Other let's see, also we'll be having gosh, what's his name? The general manager, Jay Burness, I guess that's his last name, with HRSD coming talking at the September meeting on the SWIFT project, the innovation surrounding that. Has anybody got any suggestions on topic areas we should be looking at, either as a technical committee or things that should be coming from your perspective before the commission, in addition to our continuing conversation on solar? I know that we're going to have to get into water supply, and I know that that's going to probably get us into data centers. And I'm going to want to talk a little bit more with the commission chairman about how we do that in a constructive way. I learned I'll just put this out there as we wrap this meeting up. I was listening to a presentation yesterday on crypto mining, believe it or not, and the electricity demands on data centers. And the expert was pointing out that Bitcoin, which is your big boy in the crypto world, spends more on the electricity needed than it gets per coin that they mine. Something to do with how all that system works, where they can only mine half the number now than they used to. And this is a world I don't really understand. Only point was the electricity demand now for them, they're paying more for electricity than the value of the coin they're mining. I don't get the economics of that, but so for anybody who says data centers take a lot of electricity, that sure sounds like a testament to that. But That's a world I don't know much of anything about. I just heard that tidbit yesterday, and it caught my attention. Why would you do that? I don't know. Anyway, that's for a different technical committee, I guess. Anything else before we call it a day? Tommy, go ahead. You're on mute.
Thank you. Richard Stewart, I just read, was appointed to the Chesapeake Bay Commission.
Correct.
And I know we were talking about that in Stafford last month of what legislators might be on that. And so I wanted to make sure we all knew that.
And I think another Rappahannock River Basin Commission member was the other appointee, the new senator from Loudoun and Fairfax. Oh gosh.
I forgot that. That's right.
I'm trying to find my notes from that, but yes, she was appointed.
Right.
So we have two senators on the Chesapeake Bay Commission that are both members of the Rappahannock River Basin Commission. Ashish, you got your hand up.
Yes,
Ashish.
sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just in the car now. But I just wanted to flag, it could be for a future conversation, but Solar App Plus is something that we're working on. We'll be speaking with VACO and continuing to speak with DHCD. Solar App Plus, for those unfamiliar, basically speeds up rooftop solar permitting, takes that process from 4 to 5 weeks to a couple of days. And I know Harrison's on the call. Culpeper has really been kind of ahead of the curve on this, and has adopted that to great effect over the last year and a half. And maybe y'all have already talked about this, but
we have not.
Okay.
I tell you what, would you be willing to give us a few minutes on that at our next technical committee meeting?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And by that time, I'll have some updates on some of our meetings with other groups, and it's definitely something we want to see more adoption with. We're in touch with the greater kind of IREC Sol Smart program, which Solar App Plus falls under. But yeah, I think in terms of kind of looking at more distributed sources and where some of the challenges for utility scale might be heading, I think it's something that would benefit a lot of our localities.
Okay, that would be great. We will add that to the agenda for May 22nd. Thank you. Anything else? Thank you, everybody. Good discussion today. This was kind of a freewheeling one, and I appreciate everybody going along for the ride. And we have some topics to flesh out some more as we go forward. Jillian, any housekeeping we need? Okay, good. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you May 22nd.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sheldon.